everybody, welcome back to John's Fantasy Football Show. John, it's good to be back, and what a great time to be back for the playoffs. For many, it's the championship. It's for all the marbles.
This is it. I mean, the week we've all been waiting for. There's no Thursday night football this week. They're trying to get everybody on that Sunday schedule in preparation for the playoffs, so nobody has any short weeks and nobody gets, injuries leading up to the playoffs. But I mean, Sunday is such a big day. Everybody's playing, no buys this week. And yes, a lot of people are in the fantasy football championship. If you're watching this video, hopefully you did make it there. And even if you didn't, maybe you're playing for third place, or maybe you're playing not to get last. So hopefully I could help you not get punished.
That's pretty funny. We should do a little recap of our league that we have with the Dorm Debate crew. So the championship right now is you versus Jonathan.
Yeah.
Technically Jonathan has the 1 seed. So you were the 2nd seed, right? So you guys were the clear favorites throughout the whole season. I think I was 3rd, but the separation between 3rd place, I think I was 8-7 or something around there, 500, and you guys were double-digit wins.
Yeah, exactly.
So this was definitely the matchup that needed to happen.
Yeah, it needed to get to this so that we could finally figure out who wins.
Yeah, and it's a little frustrating because John and I played last week, and I'm looking at his lineup, and I had Debo play on Thursday. He had 28. So I'm like, oh, I feel good. When that Thursday night player plays well, plus he feels so good.
Yeah,
the whole way.
Yeah. Then because he basically doubled his projection, he was only projected 15 or something. So you're like, oh shit, okay, he doubled it almost. And then I had Kittle, who was projected 16, and he only got 4. Yep. So you're feeling okay. Now the percentages is going towards you.
Yeah, dude. That once that percentage goes towards you, the win percentage, I'm like, oh, okay, all right, starting to feel a little better. Can't trust it though. And then Saturday comes, Packers play. They get 13 points, respectable.
Yeah,
I think that's fine. Percentages around, I think 68 for me, and I'm like, ooh, this is perfect. And then I see you start T. Higgins and Joe Burrow, and you have Aaron Rodgers, and
right?
You didn't start him, and I'm like, oh, he's pulling out all the stops, he's scrambling to try and get a win. So I'm like, this is exactly what I want. This is perfect. And so you put in Joe Burrow and you put in T. Higgins, and I'm sure you all know that T. Higgins was his number 1 pick, and Joe Burrow was his 2nd quarterback in the rankings. He was your first quarterback for your playoff episode all the way back weeks and weeks ago. He basically told me how he was going to beat me, and it just went right over my head. Didn't listen.
Yeah. It was so funny because on Friday, that's when I picked up Higgins and Burrow and everybody watching is going to be like, well, how the hell are they available? Well, we're in a 6-man league. So I have Brady and Rodgers as my QBs. So Burrow is available. So I picked up Burrow and picked up Higgins, and I'm like, all right, I got to be bold. I sat CeeDee Lamb and Rodgers to put in Burrow and Higgins. So it ended up working out. So maybe I could pull out a similar thing this week against Jonathan.
I made you work for it. That's all that matters.
Yeah.
I feel like the day before, I'm texting Jonathan, and Jonathan's like, you have a good shot. This is great. And I'm like, I know, but you can never count him out, man. I just had a feeling. I'm like, T. Higgins, why would John start T. Higgins? And then, I watched the live show, and he's your number 1, and history says that your number 1.
My number 1 will score a touchdown, at least 1.
Yeah,
he
scored 2, and then he had about 200 yards to add to that.
Yeah,
freaking went nuclear on me. It wasn't even fair. You just needed to win. You didn't have to beat me to the ground and embarrass me. It was
I know. I was telling you, there's one guy that messaged me on the Patreon, and I literally got to his question at 12:54. And he's like, all right, should I put Brady or Burrow? Should I put Higgins or Amari Cooper? And should I put Zeke or Montgomery? And I'm like, Higgins, Burrow, and Montgomery. And then he texts me after the 1 o'clock games. He's like, bro, I'm already up by like 150. I didn't need to like blow him out, but like I'll take it. I'm like, I figured you'd have more fun if I like told you the best guys. But next time I can get one wrong if you want. He's like, no, it's fine. I like blowing the guy out.
You didn't have to make my opponent cry like that.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, it was a good week for you nonetheless. You won. All your picks did well. We're going to try and do that again so that everybody else can win the championships. We have a great episode for you guys, packed with stuff. For many of you, this is the championship. So this is going to be your most important episode to watch. For some, I heard you have your championship next week, which is just odd to me. I don't know how that works, but
yeah,
we just got some big news that Kirk Cousins is missing the game with COVID. So we heard Sean Mannion is going to be quarterbacking from Oregon State. That's all I know about him. He's from Oregon State. But yeah, so let's dive right into it. So we're doing week 7 prep rapid fire questions.
Okay.
So the first one, I'm going to name off 3 players. You tell me who you like. Taysom Hill, Trey Lance, and Tyler Huntley. Trey Lance is starting?
Trey Lance is in line to start as of now. Jimmy Garoppolo has not practiced this week, so they're unsure of his status. But as of right now, Lance is preparing to start because of Garoppolo's thumb injury. So to keep it short, I'll try to go pretty quick. Tyler Huntley is the guy I would choose out of these 3. I know he probably has the toughest matchup out of all of them. Taysom Hill plays Carolina. And last time that the Saints played Carolina, it was all the way back in like week 2 or week 3. Winston started that game, but the Saints only put up like 7 points in that one. And Carolina's defense has been playing well. So I would try to fade Hill, even with his rushing upside. I don't like him to go over 20 points. Trey Lance against Houston, obviously great matchup. But again, it's tough to trust Trey Lance. He did start one game against the Seahawks earlier in the year, had 21 fantasy points. So beat his projection of around 18 that game. But he did have that. I think he had like an 85-yard touchdown to Debo Samuel. So that could definitely happen again against the Texans. But if it wasn't for that, then he would have had a much worse day. I'm not saying that that won't happen, because definitely Debo, and he has Kittle there, and he has Ayuk. So he has a lot of good weapons. But I still like Huntley. Remember that game against the Packers? Huntley played really well. He had 35 fantasy points in that game, 2 rushing touchdowns, 2 passing touchdowns. And don't be scared to start Mark Andrews. Obviously, he's a must start this week. Huntley just feeds him the ball every time. So you got to start Andrews. And not only that, but Rashad Bateman is an option, a streaming option. Marquise Brown, possible option as well. And when you look at the Ravens, we talked about it on our show on Thursday. The Ravens need to win this game against the Rams if they want to make the playoffs.
Oh, yeah.
So you can bet that if Huntley's starting, Harbaugh's going to give him whatever he wants. He's like, okay, we're losing by like double digits. We're going to throw the ball. Like, they're not going to play like the Giants and be like, oh yeah, let's still kind of run it. No, Huntley will have over 50 rushing yards in this game. He will have probably a rushing touchdown. His ceiling is very high and his floor is actually really high as well. So definitely stay tuned for Sunday to see where I have him ranked, but he's going to be probably in my top 10.
Number 2, another set of quarterbacks, Tom Brady, Joe Burrow, 2 guys that you have on your fantasy team.
Yeah, so 2 guys on my fantasy team, and spoiler alert, I actually have Joe Burrow in my starting position right now over Brady and over Aaron Rodgers. Now, call me crazy, but Brady doesn't have Mike Evans. Mike Evans did get activated off the COVID list yesterday, and he's been battling a hamstring injury. He might play on Sunday. We don't know yet, but he doesn't have Godwin, and Gronk only had like 2 or 3 catches last week, so he didn't really show up. And against the Jets, the Bucs should be able to run the ball and play good defense. Brady's ceiling is capped because of that, so I would downgrade Brady. And then Rodgers, I like. Obviously, he's at home against Minnesota. Minnesota hasn't been good, but I talk about it all the time where if another team doesn't have a big piece or big player, like the Vikings won't have Kirk Cousins, the defense knows that they have to win this game. They're not going to let Rodgers go off. Now, Rodgers might just be like, oh, I don't care that they're going to play good. I'm going to play even better. So it's possible that Rodgers could go off, but what are the chances that Mannion puts up 30 points and Rodgers has to go for 35 points? I don't think it's that high. I think there's a better chance that Mahomes puts points on the Bengals defense and then Burrow has to throw the ball. So I like Burrow more than Brady and Rodgers this week.
All right, number 3, we're going Stefan Diggs or Debo Samuel. I feel like I like both there. What's wrong with
Yeah.
Debo?
Yeah, I like both. And this is one of those questions where I heard a lot of people asking me this week about Stefan Diggs, and I'm not really sure why, because he's as much of a must start as you can get this week. He plays Atlanta, and Atlanta has been horrible. And I know Atlanta's playing for a playoff spot. They're 7-8, and they're close to that last wild card spot. But this Buffalo team, with Gabriel Davis coming back and Beasley coming back and McKenzie playing well, you might be worried about Diggs, but I wouldn't worry about Diggs. You have to start him this week. And if I was choosing between Debo and Diggs, I would start Diggs, but you're probably not deciding between those two players unless you're in a 6-man league. But I also do like Debo. Even if Lance starts, I still like Debo because he could be brought into the backfield and have a rushing touchdown. They could put him on slants. And remember, when Lance started that last game against Seattle, Debo had, I think, 165 yards and a touchdown on like 7 or 8 catches. So definitely make sure Debo, try to get him into your lineup as well this week.
All right, so this next part, I'm going to name receivers, and you tell me if you like them better than Keenan Allen.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, a lot of people asking me about Keenan Allen after that poor showing last week without Mike Williams. So we'll see.
Poor effort overall by the Chargers, just
Yeah, really.
around the board.
Mm-hmm.
All right, first guy, your main man, T. Higgins. Do you like him better over Keenan Allen?
Yeah, I would definitely start him over Keenan Allen. The matchup is about similar, but you definitely got to think that the Bengals are going to throw the ball more than the Chargers will, and the Bengals will probably have a little bit more success against the Chiefs.
Michael Pittman over Keenan Allen?
I would not start Pittman over Allen. I'd rather have Keenan Allen, and because Pittman doesn't, as of right now, doesn't have Wentz. Wentz could possibly be cleared Sunday morning, but I don't like Pittman even if Wentz starts. The way to attack the Raiders, like I've been saying this whole year, is in the middle of the field.
Amari Cooper over Keenan Allen.
Yeah, Cooper, I would start over Keenan Allen because Cooper is now emerged as the wide receiver 1 in Dallas. And 4 or 5 games ago, it was CeeDee Lamb. He was getting 14 targets a game. Now it's Cooper getting 14 targets a game. And you could see that. And Cooper was on my playoff special list way back 5-6 weeks ago because these teams that he's playing, they give up a lot of points to the outside receivers. Last week, Washington, they give up a lot of points to outside receivers. And then I have my notes right here. The Cardinals give up the 5th most fantasy points to receivers that line up out wide. So I would definitely try to get Amari Cooper in my lineup this week and definitely over Keenan Allen.
Is this Deontay Johnson?
Yeah, Deontay
Okay,
Johnson.
Deontay Johnson over Keenan. That's got to be yes. Come on.
Yeah, that's a yes. And part of the reason is because, and I'll mention this in a little bit, but Big Ben seems like it's going to be his last game in Pittsburgh on Monday night. So you got to start Deontay Johnson. You know, Big Ben is not going to want to run the ball a lot in his last game.
Mon-Ra St. Brown over Keenan Allen.
I mean,
who would have thought you'd say that?
I know that's tough, but I would do it. I mean, Amon-Ra St. Brown has been on a tear. He's gotten 11 or more targets in the last 4 games. And even with Goff looking unlikely to play again this week, Amon-Ra had over 25 fantasy points with Tim Boyle at quarterback last week. And the matchup against Seattle isn't all that bad either. It's around middle of the pack. So you got to try to find a way to get Amon-Ra into your lineup. And I would do it over Keenan Allen.
Scary Terry?
Scary Terry, I would not start over Keenan Allen. I would probably rather have Keenan Allen because Keenan Allen, I think he's going to have a decent game. Obviously, I don't think he's going to have a great game, but Terry is lined up out wide. Darius Slay should be on him. Don't forget the Eagles are also playing for a playoff spot there in that last wild card spot, trying to hold on to it. They're going to be trying to play good defense. Antonio Gibson placed on the COVID list just yesterday. So I know Washington's going to have to throw the ball. I'm just worried it's not going to be to Scary Terry.
And the last one, Brandon Cooks.
Yeah, Cooks, I would definitely start over Keenan Allen. And I know in almost every league, Keenan Allen is going to be projected more points, but I don't care. I need Cooks in my lineup this week against a 49ers defense that just hasn't been good. And Cooks, come Sunday, he definitely could be on my weekly pick list. He's in consideration for that. The Texans have been playing well, and the 49ers have let a lot of receivers put up a lot of points on them.
So to review, it looks like Scary Terry and Michael Pittman you would bench for Keenan Allen, and that's it.
Right. That's it out of those players.
Wow. So what do you think about Keenan Allen? Like why are you not confident in his play this week?
Well, because he didn't thrive last week against the Texans, a great matchup without Mike Williams. And not only that, but he plays Denver this week. And Denver, remember 2 weeks ago, they played the Bengals and the Bengals only put up 15 points on them. The only guy that had a decent fantasy game was Tyler Boyd, and that's because he had a 68-yard touchdown. Like T. Higgins had 2 catches for like 30 yards, and Jamar Chase had 1 catch for like 3 yards or whatever it was. So like the Broncos have been really good on the outside, and the Broncos are playing for a playoff spot. They're pretty low, but they could still get there. I think if they would need a lot of help, but I think they're going to want to play good defense. And Mike Williams, who we initially thought was going to be out for 2 games with COVID because he's unvaccinated, this CDC changed their guideline. The NFL updated their guidelines, so Mike Williams is playing now. So you got Mike Williams back, and you got a tougher defense than last week. It's just not a great scenario for Keenan Allen. If I would probably project him somewhere between 14 and 15 points.
It's not terrible.
It's not terrible, but
it's not gonna win you.
Yeah, it's not gonna win you a league. I would rather take a chance on Amon-Ra than that's why I'm saying I would take the chance.
Okay. All right. So next we're just gonna do 2 more players. Now I believe this is Michael Carter, right?
Yep.
Michael Carter from the Jets or Dare Ogunbowale. I'm gonna guess he's on the Jaguars.
Yes, that is correct. So Ogunbowale on the Jaguars or Michael Carter.
Okay.
Yeah.
My apologies.
So between those 2 players, obviously James Robinson tore his Achilles, and Ogunbowale is going to be starting this week. And even last week against the Jets, in a good matchup, he had 15 fantasy points playing only 3 of the quarters. So I do like Ogunbowale. They obviously, the way to attack the Patriots is on the ground. You really can't throw much on them. And I expect the Patriots to dominate this game, but Ogunbowale should have his opportunities. But Michael Carter, I actually like a little bit more this week. Tevin Coleman was just placed on the COVID list. So Michael Carter is going to get most of the snaps, if not all of them. But then you're probably saying, well, John, why would you pick Michael Carter over Ogunbowale? I mean, Ogunbowale has much better matchup. Aren't the Bucks like impossible to run on? Yes, they are. I don't expect Michael Carter to get over 50 rushing yards, but I do expect Michael Carter to have more receiving yards than rushing yards. So just on that alone, I think Michael Carter's floor is 10 points because he's going to have at least 5 catches out of the backfield, probably closer to 7 or 8. And then that puts him at, if he gets 7 catches for 50 yards, that's already 12 points right there without rushing or without getting into the end zone. So I do like Carter to beat his projection, maybe not by a whole lot, but I do like him a little bit more than Ogunbowale now that Tevin Coleman's on the COVID list.
Okay. This next one, I'm going to list off some running backs. You tell me if you would start them over Josh Jacobs of the Raiders.
Okay.
Devin Singletary.
Yeah, I would start him over Jacobs.
DeAndre Swift.
Yeah, I would start him over Jacobs as well. Practice this week, and they're saying he's a full go for Sunday.
Rojo, who I just learned is the nickname for Ronald Jones.
Yes, Ronald Jones. I would start him over Josh Jacobs. He plays the Jets this week. They give up the most fantasy points to running backs, and Jones had over 20 carries last week, so I do like his matchup and I like his volume, so I would start him over Jacobs.
Cordell Patterson.
I would not start Patterson over Jacobs. No, I wouldn't this week. And the reason, I know they both have tough matchups. Cordero plays Buffalo And now Buffalo's run defense, you might be saying, hasn't been amazing. And no, it hasn't been. It's been okay the last few weeks, but Mike Davis has been getting a lot of opportunities. And Josh Jacobs, while he has a tough matchup, he's playing the Indianapolis Colts, which have been pretty good against the ground. Jacobs did have 27 carries last week against the Broncos. So the Raiders might take a similar approach. But even with 27 carries, Jacobs only ended up with 11 fantasy points. He was one of my must-sit players. He was projected closer to 16. And this week, he's projected around 16 fantasy points. I don't think he gets to that, but I think he's going to get around 13, maybe 14 fantasy points. I don't think Cordero gets to 13 or 14.
Boston Scott.
Okay, well, this is a very interesting situation. A lot of people are going to be asking me about Boston Scott leading up into the weekend and on Sunday during my live. Now, Boston Scott is only an option, I would say, if Jordan Howard doesn't play. Howard was limited in practice, I think, yesterday, so he might play. Probably will play on Sunday. In which case, I would probably still start Jacobs over Scott. But if Jordan Howard sits, then I would start Scott over Jacobs because it would just be Scott and Gainwell in the backfield. And we saw what the Washington football team defense looked like against Dallas. It was just absolutely horrible. So if you have one of the two starting running backs, I would definitely start Scott over Jacobs if Howard doesn't play.
Rashad Penny.
Penny, I would start over Jacobs purely because of the matchup. His volume is not going to be as much, but you're betting that Penny is going to break out for a long run, like a 30-yard run, and punch in a touchdown at some point against the Lions.
Last one, Damien Harris.
Yeah, Harris, it's a tough situation because you guys are saying, well, last week against the Bills, Harris had over 100 yards and 3 touchdowns, 27 fantasy points. You're like, well, against the Jaguars, he has to be started, right? Well, he was limited in practice all week. And we've seen him be limited in practice all week before and not play on Sunday. So you might be concerned about his injury. Plus, Ramondre Stevenson is back from the COVID list. So you're like, well, if they're leading by a lot, that might give Stevenson some work. I would still start Harris over Josh Jacobs. Now, Harris is not a must start. I know he has a great matchup, but the Patriots might try to get Ramondre Stevenson involved. But I would start Harris, assuming Harris plays. And the reports are that he's going to be basically full strength and he's not going to have limitations. I would start Harris over Jacobs.
All right. Our last one goes to the tight ends.
Okay.
Pat Fryermuth or Gerald Everett.
Okay. Good question, because Everett had a touchdown last week, had about 14 or 15 fantasy points, I think, which is pretty good for him. And a lot of people are liking his matchup this week against the Lions, but they're projected about the same amount. They're both projected, I think, 8.7 or around 9 points. But if it was me this week, I would go with Pat Fryermuth. And this is what I wanted to bring up before. Now, Jared, do you think that Roethlisberger is going to want to play his last home game at Heinz Field and not throw the ball 25 or 30 times? I think it's basically guaranteed that he's going to try to throw it 25, 30 times, maybe 300 yards and a couple touchdowns. He's going to want to win this game. And if he's throwing the ball, I think it's going to be using Deontay Johnson, using Pat Fryermuth. So I would feel more confident in starting Fryermuth this week than Gerald Everett.
Yeah, and the Seahawks are playing who?
The Lions. So Everett does have a good matchup.
It's a scrappy team, though.
Yeah, it is. It's scrappy. I mean, when you think about it, Everett could have a touchdown, but also the Seahawks could go to a bunch of different guys. Like, what's stopping them from going to Metcalf or Lockett or just running it with Penny? Like, I don't feel confident enough that Everett is going to be able to get a touchdown again, but I feel more confident that Fryermuth will be able to, with Big Ben's motivation and the whole team just motivated to play better with Big Ben being his final game there.
Oh, I mean, Ben should be calling plays at that point. I mean,
right.
Tomlin doesn't need to be there. He just literally, it should be whatever Big Ben wants, Big Ben gets.
Right.
His last game, doesn't even matter if you win or lose. You're out of the playoffs already. There's no risk at all. It's just have Big Ben chuck it down the field as many times as he wants.
Right.
So he does like Fryermuth. Like in the red zone, he likes Fryermuth.
Yeah.
There was that game he had 2 touchdowns.
Yeah.
So it's possible he goes to him a lot. Yeah, it's so sad. But Monday Night Football is gonna be a good one.
Yeah, it is.
So sad. Well, that ends our first segment. That one took a little bit longer than I thought, so we'll speed through the fantasy strategy quickly.
Okay.
As usual, we have the fantasy strategies every single week. These are strategies that John implements to get to the championship, which he is in right now. And I'm sure you're in a bunch more in your other leagues, correct?
Yeah, I'm in 3 leagues, 2 of them I'm in the championship this week.
There you go. These are the strategies. This is the behind the curtain of what John does to get to the championship, but nonetheless win his leagues as well. So the first one I see, defenses. We always talk about defense. It wins championships. Will it win people championships this week, John?
I think so. And I apologize because I did recommend the Chargers defense against the Texans, and they ended up with negative points. So I'm sorry about that. But I think we have 2 great matchups next week that you guys could look at. And one of them is the New Orleans Saints, if they're available in your league and you think you might get to the championship next week. Or I know ESPN does a 2-week championship. So if you're in the championship this week and it accounts points for next week as well, definitely pick up the Saints defense if they're available, or the Green Bay defense, because the Saints play the Atlanta Falcons next week in week 18, and the Packers play the Detroit Lions next week. So definitely try to get them into your lineup or on your team. Just be careful with the Packers. They're obviously, if they're not a must start, if Rodgers sits and Jordan Love starts, then I would be a little bit more careful about Green Bay defense if Green Bay locks in that number 1, playoff bye. I'm not sure like how the tiebreaker would work if they lose and the Cowboys keep winning and have the same record. But either way, just keep an eye on that into next week. But definitely if the Saints or the Packers are available, pick them up if you have an open spot, so you at least have that opportunity to play them in good matchups next week.
And then we're going with backup quarterbacks. A lot of quarterbacks are being started this year, maybe a record for just because of COVID, everyone getting COVID, in and out of protocols. Sean Mannion, the most recent one we talked about, backup quarterback coming in. Do you like him to start?
I mean, he's probably going to start this week, but I would rather have a quarterback that has rushing upside. I don't think Mannion has that. No. But what I'm saying here is basically pick up these backup quarterbacks, Huntley, Taysom Hill, Trey Lance. They should all be rostered in all leagues at this point. And if you're in the championship, or you're going to make it next week, or you're already in it in a cruise for 2 weeks, definitely get the backup quarterbacks, because you don't want, if you have like Mahomes or something, or Brady or Rodgers or something, you don't want to get to next week and then on Thursday or Friday next week, it's like, oh, this guy gets COVID and now you're out your starting quarterback. So I'm just saying, make sure you have backup plans for running backs, backup plans for, quarterback. Obviously, if you have Eckler, you should be having Justin Jackson on your bench, because if Eckler is on the COVID list or gets injured, Justin Jackson just had 30 fantasy points when Eckler wasn't there. So you need Jackson on your team. Just pick up these backup players, backup quarterbacks, backup running backs are very important if you have the open roster spot, so that next week you're not scrambling, because if the other guy that you're facing in the championship gets the news article before you do, then he's going to pick up the guy before you do.
Amazing. Thank you for your fantasy strategies. That is the second to last one that we'll do for this season. So a lot of strategies, and they've worked out for a lot of people. I've seen a lot of comments, and we have a lot of people in the championship, and they're like thanking you, because they're like, oh, it's because of all your picks and your weekly picks and must sets that I'm in the championship. What do you feel about that?
I mean, I definitely thank you guys for following. And if you do say that, always what I say to that is that it's really you guys. I mean, I'm just here. I mean, like I was telling you, Jared, last week, there's a lot of all these different scenarios. There's COVID, there's injuries, there's matchups, there's target share and running back snaps and all these different things of all these players and everything. And I basically filter that down and tell you guys, okay, there's all this different scenarios going on. What is that like? Who should I start? Like, these are my weekly picks. These are my must sits, but it's really you guys because I'm not 100% right. So like, it's basically your guys' decision to watch my lives and watch my picks and be like, all right, does this seem like a reasoning that I agree with? And should I put them in? So thank you guys for thanking me for my advice, but it's really you guys because it's your team and you guys have the final decision. So if you guys have made it to the championship, then it's all you. I'm just here as an option for advice and help, but it's really you guys making the decision. So congrats and great job.
All right, we're going to end off with the week 17 predictions. Now it's going to be the same as we've done in the past. We have games that John loves, games that John hates, and then he's got his weekly pick and his must sit. So first off, as always, games that you love, John. Tell me about them.
Yeah, so the first one I love is the Chiefs and Bengals. That should be high scoring. It's in Cincinnati, which is good because the Chiefs defense at home, I don't think they've let up more than 10 points to an opponent in the last 3 home games. So this is good that it's in Cincinnati. It's better for the Bengals to score points, better for the Chiefs to score points. I'm hoping that this is a 20-plus point game for both teams. I think it's going to be a really fun one to watch. So if you have Kelsey, Hill, Daryl Williams, if CEH is out, Daryl Williams is a great play. Mahomes, you're definitely starting. Burrow, I'm starting in my 6-man probably against Jonathan. T. Higgins, I'm starting in that same 6-man. So definitely try to get him into your lineup after a career day last game. Jamar Chase, you're trying to get in there. Uzama is a decent streaming option. Mixon, you're trying to get in there because he did great even against a bad matchup last week. So try to get all these players into your lineup. And I know a lot of you guys are going to be asking, well, what about Tyreke Hill and Kelsey? I did want to touch on that for a second. Tyreke Hill, it came out this week that he didn't play a lot last week. He only played 42% of the snaps, I think it was, and only had a few targets last week. And Byron Pringle was the one that had a big game. And it was because Tyreke Hill said he was exhausted after having COVID the week before and just getting cleared in time for the game. So I would be a little bit worried about that for Kelsey, but you're not going to, there's really no other options that you have. If you're deciding between Kelsey and like Everett, you're definitely going Kelsey. Now, Kelsey could be fatigued a little bit after getting COVID, but you really can't worry about that. As far as Tyreke Hill goes, he was, exhausted last week, but I think I would assume that that's probably behind him. And this week against the Bengals, Tyreek should be back to his normal self, probably over 20 fantasy points. So definitely make sure he's in your lineup. The second game is the Cardinals-Cowboys. I know the Cowboys defense played great against Washington and the Cardinals have been struggling, but I think at AT&T Stadium in Dallas, this is just going to be a great game to watch. I can't wait for this game. Cardinals Cowboys should be super fun. Obviously, Ertz, if you could get him into your lineup, Chase Edmonds or James Conner, whichever one starts. Kyler, try to get him in. Dak, you're trying to get into your lineup. Amari Cooper, definitely try to get into your lineup. Schultz is also a top 5 option for me at tight end. So a lot of these guys have good matchups. Try to upgrade these guys. Could be a higher scoring game. And then the last one is the Rams versus Ravens. And obviously with Huntley at quarterback expected to start, I think, with Lamar not practicing this week. I just talked about it a few minutes ago. The Ravens are going to try to win this game. Like they're going to go all out to win this game. So Mark Andrews, get into your lineup. Huntley, I would try to get into your lineup. And then obviously Bateman had a touchdown last week. Marquise Brown had a bunch of targets. So they're decent options as well. And then on the Rams, obviously Sony Michel, now that Henderson is out, he's a decent option. The Ravens do have a really good run defense, so I'd be a little bit careful about Michel, but he's still a decent start. Stafford, obviously a great matchup for him. And then Cooper Kupp, you're starting. Odell, you would upgrade because the Ravens' just pass defense has just been absolutely horrible. So definitely upgrade all the guys in these games.
I agree with all of them so far.
Good.
All right. Not that that matters at all. I'm just saying it to reassure you. Games that you hate, John. Now, on this list, you have the Giants. And you just can't argue with that.
No, you just can't argue that the Giants just want to keep it close, not get embarrassed. They just want to run the ball, let the clock go all the way down. Maybe, take a timeout with 1 second left once in a while and just let it go all the way down. So Giants versus Bears. I don't see how you could be confident in starting any Giants player. I might have Saquon Barkley
None.
on my sit lead. Like, how could you be confident that Barkley is going to have anything? But Booker splits time, literally 50-50 with him. Like, if I had Barkley, I would not be starting him this week. I'd rather Rashad Penny than Barkley.
And in the game that we went to and many other games, Booker has played better.
Yeah, literally. Like when Booker gets handed the ball, we're like, oh my gosh. And we're like, wait, was that Barkley? And no,
Yeah.
that was Booker. Huh.
There
That
was
was
like
like,
a huge run, and you're like, yes, Barkley, finally. And you're like, oh no, it's Booker.
yeah.
Wow,
So it's like,
that's sad.
yeah, it's just horrible. So like you can't feel confident starting any Giants player. And then for the Bears, literally the only guy that you could start is David Montgomery or the Bears defense, right? Like Darnell Mooney, I wouldn't even be that confident in starting because remember the Cowboys against the Giants? Like the Giants just keep everything in front of them. Like Amari Cooper had like 2 catches for 30 yards. Like
Mhm.
CeeDee Lamb had like 4 catches for 50 yards. Like nobody had over 10 fantasy points other than Schultz. So like I wouldn't even be confident starting Darnell Mooney this week. It's literally just like the Bears defense or Montgomery. Those are the only two that you're considering starting in this game because it's going to be low scoring. The second game that I hate, which might be surprising, is the Dolphins Titans.
Yeah,
Now,
this is surprising.
it's surprising, but I'm really excited to watch this game because I think the Dolphins are going to win. But I think it's going to be a fun game to watch. Both teams playing for playoff spots. The reason I think it's a hate game is because both teams are going to be playing strong defense. Now, the Dolphins just had, I think, 8 sacks against the Saints. They made Ian Book look like he was a high school quarterback. And the Titans, their games lately have been very low scoring. And now when we saw the Titans against the 49ers last Thursday, how did they move the ball down the field? You can't run on the 49ers, so you had to pass it. And A.J. Brown had 16 targets. The next most targeted player was Westbrook-Ikhine with 3 targets. So literally they funneled the ball to A.J. Brown.
Hmm.
And this week against the Dolphins, they have Xavier Howard, and he's a really good cornerback. So he's going to be on A.J. Brown. And I think that's the Titans' best option to move the ball down the field. So if you can't have that, they're going to try to run the ball and then punt it, play field position. And then on the other side, like the Titans, they've been playing better defense recently. You really can't run on the Titans. So like Gaskin, Duke Johnson, not going to have good games. The only way for the Dolphins to move the ball is by throwing to like Waddle, who they've been throwing to. So I think this is going to be low scoring. I think Waddle is going to have a better game than A.J. Brown. And I think that's going to be how it's going to go. I don't think any team is going to get to 20 points. And if they do, I only think one of the teams will get to 20 points. So I just think it's going to be low scoring. I mean, A.J. Brown is tough to sit after what he did last week, but it's literally like Waddle and A.J. Brown are the only guys you're considering starting in this game. And
I
then,
agree. I agree with that. I think I underestimated AJ Brown because
yeah,
he's getting a lot of targets, but that doesn't mean you always produce, and he's been producing since.
right.
So.
And then the last one is the Panthers versus Saints. I mean, a lot of you guys are going to be asking me about Alvin Kamara this week. And it's tough because Kamara, the last 2 weeks, have been projected over 18 and 19 fantasy points each of the last 2 weeks and hasn't cracked 10 fantasy points in either game. It's just very tough. I know Taysom Hill is back this week, which should help him. But the Carolina defense held Kamara to 7.6 fantasy points back in week 2 or 3. So how could you feel very confident in Kamara? I just would not feel very confident in Kamara this week. It's tough to sit him because of all, his firepower. He could easily just break out for a 50-yard touchdown, but he's splitting time with Mark Ingram as well. I'm not going to say he's a must sit, but there are definitely better options available. And then Taysom Hill, I don't really love either. Like I said, I like Huntley more than him. So I would be careful about Taysom Hill. Then you're not starting anybody else on the Saints. And then for the Panthers, you're not starting Chuba Hubbard or Amir Abdullah because the Saints run defense is amazing. Like you're not starting Cam. Like Robbie Anderson's too hard to trust. Like literally the only guy is like DJ Moore that you could possibly start.
What do you feel about my idea to stack Sam Darnold and DJ Moore? They had a good connection in the beginning of the season. Think they may rekindle it for the last couple of games?
I mean, it's possible, but the reason I would say no is because the Saints are playing for a playoff spot. Like we talked about before, the Saints could still make the playoffs. They would have to win out, but they could make the playoffs. So the Saints are going to be playing as good defense as they can. So I would rather you pick up Huntley if he's available and start him, or Trey Lance over Darnold. And then DJ Moore, I mean, it's possible, but we just saw Marshawn Lattimore hold Devontae Parker to 0 points. And Devontae Parker was one of my must-sit players, but like I didn't expect 0. So like DJ Moore, he could have a decent game, but it's tough for me to trust. Like DJ Moore is the best option on the Panthers and Kamara is the best option on the Saints, but it's even tough for me to say either of them will get over 15 points. So just be careful with anybody in these games that I hate.
All right. On to what everyone's been waiting for. Favorite part, John's Fantasy Football Show, the weekly pick and must sit. And I see some names on here. It is your lucky day, everybody, because we have some names for weekly picks and must sits. And you can probably tell what the must sit is probably from the first segment that we did. So let's go with the weekly pick first.
Okay. So now it's a tough situation because this guy actually, he was practiced Wednesday. He was in limited practice. Then he didn't practice on Thursday. And then Friday, they say he's a game time decision. So I'm a little bit nervous now. He tweaked his ankle in practice, I think on Wednesday or Thursday or something. But it's Antonio Brown. He had a lot of catches and a lot of yards last week. I think 10 catches, 109 yards or something like that against the Panthers. Now, a lot of you might be saying, well, maybe why do you think he's going to have a good game? Like, shouldn't the Buccaneers be able to just play good defense, run the ball? And not like Mike Evans seems to like he's coming back. Like it seems like Mike Evans, he's cleared from the COVID list, his hamstring, he seems like he's going to play. So why the heck would you have Antonio Brown? Well, there's a really interesting situation going on with Antonio Brown.
This is the stat that I've been waiting for.
This is the stat that you've been waiting for. And there's something really interesting going on with Antonio Brown. Now, he has the chance to earn over $1 million in incentives for his stats in these next 2 games. So he would earn $333,000 if he got 11 more catches. He's currently at 39 catches on the season. If he got to 50 catches, he would get another $333,000. If he has 519 yards currently. If he got to 600 yards, which is only 81 more yards, he would get another $333,000. And if he got to 800 yards, which is only 281 more yards, he would get to another $333,000. And then for touchdowns, he has 4 touchdowns. If he got to 5 touchdowns, he would get another $333,000. And if he got to 7 touchdowns, with only 3 more touchdowns in the next 2 games, he would get another $333,000. So he has the chance to make a lot of money in these next 3 games. But you might be saying, John, the teams don't care about this stuff. Like, it's not like Brady and Brown are like looking at this stuff. It's not like Brown is going into these meetings and being like, oh, Tom, like I can make a lot of money in these next few games. And, it's not like Tom Brady is like, oh, yeah, okay, let me get you the ball more. No, they're just probably going to be playing their game plan and doing what they want. They don't really care about these incentives. Well, I actually think they do care about these incentives because last year there was this exact scenario with Antonio Brown. He needed 11 catches in the final game against the Atlanta Falcons to get to 45 catches and earn another $250,000. And what did he have in that game? Antonio Brown had 14 targets, 11 catches. So he had exactly 45 catches on the year to make that $250,000. He had 138 yards and he had 2 touchdowns in that final game of the season. So what does that tell me for this game? I think Antonio Brown is going to have at least, maybe he doesn't get to 11 catches and get all the catches in this one game, but I think he's going to have at least 8 catches, 100 yards, and a touchdown. That's 24 fantasy points. So he's only projected 18. And I know a lot of you are going to be saying, well, you can't pick a weekly pick that's like already projected like 18 points because like that's too good. But the point of my weekly picks is to predict guys that are going to beat their projection by the biggest percentage. And I think Antonio Brown projected 18 points. I think that's too low this week. I think he's going to get more than 18 points, even against a Jets defense that has only given up 10 touchdowns all year to wide receivers and who's a run funnel defense and somebody that I don't even think the Bucs are going to have to throw that much. But when they do, I think they're going to use Antonio Brown. So that's my reasoning. That's an important stat. What I will say about Mike Evans, which I'll mention on my live, is that there was some reporter that was there at practice on Friday. Mike Evans returned to practice on Friday, being cleared from the COVID list. They said he was running better from his hamstring injury, but he got fatigued very easily because he just had COVID this week. So we just saw what Tyreke Hill happened to him on
Yeah.
Sunday. So just be careful about Mike Evans. If Antonio Brown plays and he's pretty much full strength, maybe he's a game time decision as of right now, but if he plays, he's probably going to be my number one weekly pick, but we'll see.
What are you going to do when fantasy's over, man? You're looking into people's contracts and
I know I got to just look at everything.
I mean, I never ever would I think of that.
I
Well, here's
know.
my
It's
thing
like,
is what if he does a little bit this game and then does everything in the last game of the season?
right. That's definitely possible, but I think it's easier to do it against the Jets, I think, than against the Panthers, who they just played last week and they're going to play again next week. Plus, if Evans is back next week, then Brady can throw to him as well. So Brady might be like, all right, let's at least get you like, he only needs one touchdown and 81 yards. Like if he got 81 yards, he would meet the first yardage threshold. And if he got one touchdown, he would meet the first touchdown threshold. And then maybe the catches, he's like, all right, we can get you the catches threshold next game. So that's why I'm saying like 8 catches, 100 yards, and a touchdown this game. That's pretty reasonable. 24 fantasy points.
Yeah. Oh, all right. All right. Well, so your next must sit, what did you go through their family history?
Yeah, so this guy, no.
Is it he broke up with his ex-girlfriend on this date and he's not going to play well?
Yeah, well, it's a date for him that means a lot, and he gets it very emotional on that date.
Yeah.
So
Can't see because all the tears in his eyes he can't catch.
exactly.
Oh, I just named his position. Shoot.
Yeah. So he is wide receiver, and like you said, you could probably infer this this must sit from what we talked about in the first segment. But the guy is Michael Pittman. He's probably going to be my number one must sit, but he's definitely going to be on my must sit board. And it feels like I've picked Pittman a lot. Like, have I not? I think I've picked him 2 times already to be a must sit. And I'm going to pull up because I know one of them was against the Patriots. And one of them, let me see. I know I picked him a couple. Yeah, one of them was against the Patriots when he had 1.7 points. And then I picked him. And then remember, I picked him as a must sit against Buffalo and then that was the game that Jonathan Taylor had a huge game. Pittman had 4.3 points. So in 2 games that I've picked Pittman as a must sit, he's combined 6 fantasy points in those 2 games. So he's averaging 3 fantasy points when I pick him as a must sit, and I'm picking him again as a must sit this week. So maybe not try to get him into your lineup. He's playing the Las Vegas Raiders. He is at home, but I've talked about this all year. The way to attack the Raiders is not out wide. You attack them in the middle of the field and by running the ball. I fully expect Jonathan Taylor to have over 100 yards and at least 1 touchdown in this game. And now it's possible that Wentz gets cleared from COVID on Sunday morning. Now, what if fatigue is a factor, or if the playbook, being able to practice is a factor? Either way, whether Wentz plays or Wentz doesn't play, I'm still trying to get Pittman out of my lineup. I like Keenan Allen over him. Like I said, I would even start some of the lower tier guys like Brandon Cooks, even lower than that. I would start over Pittman. Definitely ask me in the chat or on my live on Sunday or on my Patreon who I would start him over. But I would be very surprised if Pittman beat his projection of 15.43 points this week.
All right. Yeah, it seems like after you picked Pittman that 1 week, it's just been people have expected that type of performance.
Right.
But that's why he's always in the must sit, because people project him to score well.
Right. They always project him so much.
Yeah. But Jonathan Taylor, man, just hand it off to him. You don't even
Yeah.
need to pass.
You don't need to do anything else.
Especially this week. Who's the quarterback? Ellinger?
Yeah.
So that's also a thing that goes into it. I don't know how good he is. He's from Texas, good guy, but I don't know if he's ready to start fully. So
Right.
I imagine it's just handoff every single play. And
Yeah.
then pass on like a 3rd and long.
Right.
So, all right. Well, that was probably one of the best podcasts you've ever had.
Yeah.
Next to the playoff podcast, that was like the most content I think that we've ever had.
Yeah, I can't wait. And if you guys are listening still, thank you for making it this long, but definitely stay tuned for my live on Sunday or join the Patreon, because if you can't make the live or if you just want to support us, you can head over there and join any of the tiers. Join tier 2 if you want me to answer any of your questions, or if you just want to take a chance and go into the TikTok chat and see if I answer your question. But definitely stay tuned for that live, because there's a lot of guys that I like that I didn't mention in this podcast. So definitely stay tuned for that. It's going to be a great show, and I can't wait to help you guys win.
Yeah, good luck in all the championship games or playoff games. As far as promotional stuff, we just posted a Dorm Debate podcast 2 days ago. Well, yesterday on Thursday. So that post is up. We got banned from TikTok, as many of you guys know. So you can get the full story in that podcast. Like the first 15, 16 minutes, we talk about the situation of how we got banned. It was basically when we walked into MetLife. We were literally at the game when it happened. So go over to that podcast, leave a like on there, leave a comment, and hopefully you guys win your leagues this week. It's going to be crazy
Yeah,
week.
it's going to be insane.
I tell you what, it's not even over. It's only Friday for us. There could be more COVID stuff coming out. Some
Yep.
people could be going out of protocol. Some could be going in. It's a crazy year. One more thing, John. What do you think of this year compared to other years? As far as COVID goes, like the way that it's shaken up the whole, like I said before, like I feel like it's the most different starting quarterbacks that I think I've ever seen, with Tim Boyle, Davis Mills came in, Tyrod Taylor with him. Now we're getting Sam Ellinger. Like we even talked about Philip Rivers even coming out of retirement to start.
Yeah, and Drew Brees has been getting calls to come back.
Yeah, I mean, you've even seen it with the NBA, and they're bringing guys like Joe Johnson, who's almost 40, or maybe he is 40, coming on for 10-day contracts. They're just rapidly handing guys 10-day contracts. Like, how does that affect your fantasy analysis? Like, I don't know, do you buy in? Like, there's a lot of hype when that happens. Like, I imagine, like, say if Philip Rivers came back, there'd be a lot of hype surrounding him being like, oh, he's going to have this great game. But like, how do you really just break it down to like just the numbers?
Yeah, it's tough. Honestly, it's shaken up the whole league, like you said. And honestly, it's been more fun. I love the more variables that I have to consider, the more fun it is for me to decide between a couple players, because there's so many different factors. And basically, fantasy football is about taking a player or two players, assessing each of their situations and, all the matchups, the COVID injuries, COVID situations for their team, the other team, injuries for both teams and their respective positions. And then you got coaching, you got all this different, you got strategy to go into, you got all these different things to consider, and you have to decide, okay, is it better to start this guy or this guy? And I love it. The more injuries, the more COVID stuff. Obviously, I don't wish that upon anybody. I haven't had COVID yet, but I hope nobody gets it or gets, hospitalized or anything from it. But it's been fun to experience that, but I'm hoping it goes away soon, to be honest, so that we could get back to, full football of everybody playing, because it's very unfortunate for fantasy owners of Justin Jefferson, who has helped them get to the playoffs. And now Justin Jefferson is like pretty much downgraded to like a wide receiver 2 for this week, not even a wide receiver 1, because Mannion is going to start. So it's frustrating sometimes, especially if you have some of those players. Like last week, I would have made the championship in my other league if Tyreke Hill had a halfway decent game. But it's like, it's because COVID affected him and he was just exhausted. And I really can't blame him for that, because that's just life and that's just what happens. But I mean, it has been disappointing for some, and it has taken away some of those, I guess, bigger games. Like we haven't seen many of those games this year where the team just goes off. Like how many games, like I think, remember that Thursday game between the Chargers and Chiefs where Tyreke Hill had 150 yards and a touchdown, and like Kelsey had over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns, like a crazy game where it's like, oh my gosh, this guy just goes off. Like Jonathan Taylor, that 5 touchdown game. But like there hasn't been that many games of that, because it's hard to get into a rhythm when guys are on the COVID list, can't practice with the team, or guys can practice with the team, but then this guy can't practice with the team. And then the other team has this, like, there's so many scenarios that it's fun for fantasy managers like me to give people advice and taking all these factors into account. But I think everybody would agree that it's better without COVID, and hopefully everybody gets their booster shot. And I think it's just going to be progressively better. I think next season's going to be better. I think the quarantine time is going to be way less, so that people can still practice and maybe still attend team meetings with masks on or something, so that we could still get more points scored and have more of a cohesive offense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, a good positive to look at it is a lot of these quarterbacks, third string, fourth string guys that may not even get not reasonable. What's the word I'm looking for? Meaningful snaps.
Right.
Like Tim Boyle, right? Is that his name?
Yeah.
From the Lions. Like, his story is like he went to Connecticut, didn't even do that well at Connecticut, got onto an NFL roster, just jumped from practice squads, and then just gets in the right place, right time, where COVID hits, injuries hit, and all of a sudden you're now the starting quarterback of an NFL team. So
Yeah.
it's like it's given a lot of opportunities to players that definitely wouldn't have had that big of an opportunity anywhere else.
Right.
So it's good for them. I haven't seen many make the most of it, I will say.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, Ian Book had probably one of the worst performances I think I've seen of starting, backup
Yeah.
do. But there's some stats behind that. It's like the the Ohio State quarterbacks, the Notre Dame quarterbacks. They said they're 0 and like 44 in starts, or
Oh,
0 and 14, or 0 and 24.
wow.
Like, they have not won a start in like 14 or 24 straight starts at quarterback. Going
Wow.
back to like Brady Quinn, hang on, Brady Quinn, Ian Book, Deshaun Kaiser when he lost 16
Oh
straight
gosh.
or 17 straight. And then
Yeah.
remember the guy that was on Carolina, not Calhoun, but like, oh, it's gonna haunt me now. Everyone that's a Carolina fan knows exactly what I'm talking about. Jimmy Clausen.
When was this?
This was a long time ago, like 2000s, 2010,
Oh.
that era. But
Uh-huh.
yes, since that, all those quarterbacks, it's like 0 and 24 straight or something like that.
Wow.
So there's just those little tiny things. But yeah, I mean, good opportunities for everyone, but definitely without COVID is what I would want for the
Yeah.
NFL. So, all right, that wraps it up for the episode. And thank you, John, for the great advice, as always. And we will see you guys next week. Hopefully, you guys are holding up that fantasy football trophy.